So we'll start from the basics. Okay. And the agenda for this first presentation is this presentation will be short for maybe 10 to 15 minutes only. And we'll look at the things like why Kubernetes, what is Kubernetes, and how to go about it. These three will be the topics. The last three are, I'll not cover those. Okay. So, like, So Kubernetes was, created by Google, and they felt the need to create it in year 2014 because they were deploying application, and Google was facing problems with those. So they have to scale up and scale down very rapidly, and they were seeing as high as 2 billion containers per week, or we can say 3,000 per second. Now, if you most of you must have heard about virtual machines. So the problem with virtual machines is that when you create new virtual machines, it is a resource intensive task, and you cannot create a virtual machine very rapidly. So bringing up a virtual machine is more costlier than containers. Containers can be created and destroyed very quickly. The reason for that is, it is not a fully fledged OS, full-fledged OS. They use the kernel space of your host OS itself. But in case of virtual machines, there is a hypervisor, and on top of that hypervisor, we have separate operating systems that we call guest OS. Okay. So what happens is when an application wants to do a system call, let's say it wants to write to the memory, to the RAM, it will call the guest OS. Then the guest OS will think that the hypervisor is the kernel, the hardware basically. So hypervisor will then translate it to host OS, and then host OS will run it on the actual hardware. But in case of containers, this process is very fast. So these are some of the benefits of containers and containers over virtual machines. Okay. Um, if you have any questions on this or any doubts on this, please put them in the chat box, and Anshul will take it up and let me know. So yeah, now creating these containers manually is not possible. Okay. So Google needed some way to automate this task because they had to bring up, let's say the scale here was 3,000 containers per second, right? So that's where Kubernetes comes in. It is a container orchestration platform. So basically, it takes those containers, brings them up, and do all the plumbing, whatever is needed, like कोई volume लगाना है, कोई network setup करना है, anything that is required, Kubernetes will done it on behalf of you. So think of it as like there is a software engineer. Kubernetes is a software engineer which is doing whatever you need it to do. Basically, वो site reliability engineer type का एक समझ लो Kubernetes. And AWS में Kubernetes का ये जो ग्राफ है कम दिख रहा है because AWS बहुत old player है और उनके पास जो मतलब ट्रेडिशनल वाला VM इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर है ना वो बहुत ज्यादा है, तो इस वजह से लग रहा है, वरना ऐसे देखा जाए तो AWS भी इन दोनों के कंपैरिजन में काफी आगे Kubernetes यूज करता है, और गूगल क्लाउड प्लेटफॉर्म की भी गूगल ने वैसी Kubernetes बनाया है, तो दे आर यूजिंग Kubernetes फ्रॉम ग्राउंड अप. That's why their usage of Kubernetes is high. So अब मैं ब्रॉडली एक ओवरव्यू एक दूंगा कि Kubernetes अगर किसी लेमैन इंसान की भाषा में मैं बात करूं, लाइक what is Kubernetes अगर कोई मुझसे पूछे. So I will just say that Kubernetes helps you gather all your hardware resources, combine them, combine their compute power into one big cluster, and then you can run everything on that cluster basically. So let's say you have one node which is a desktop with CPU capacity of 3000 and a RAM of 64 gigabytes. And then you have a laptop and a watch. So watch obviously would have less RAM and CPU, but you can can combine all these three into this cluster, and this cluster will have the combined power of these nodes. Okay, uh, maybe a little bit less to run the Kubernetes itself, but you get the idea. Okay, now as you can see in this image, in this one, this Kubernetes cluster has also some hardware resources attached. This is a hard disk. So this node, let's say this is a laptop, has a 250 gigabyte hard disk, and this is a desktop which has a 1 terabyte hard disk, and maybe this is a server which has a 2 terabyte hard disk. So when you attach these nodes to this cluster, all of this hard drive capability will be available to this cluster. So basically, it will be 3.25 terabytes. And there are some logical things inside Kubernetes. So let's say अब मैं कोई मुझसे बोले कि अच्छा ठीक है ये समझ आ गया कि मैंने बहुत सारे कंप्यूटर्स लिए सबको एक साथ जोड़ा क्लस्टर बन गया ओके अब मैं क्या करूँ उसका so if you have done any deployments in the traditional way you will maybe create a virtual machine and then install all of your dependency. Let's say you are building a Python application, you will do pip install requirements.txt और फिर तुम्हारा सब कुछ setup हो जाएगा and then you will run your actual code, right? So you first set up your environment. In Kubernetes you do it differently. You create containers basically. So every container is isolated. उसको दूसरे किसी से मतलब नहीं है कि बाहर क्या हो रहा है. कंटेनर के पास कंटेनर इज क्रिएटेड फ्रॉम एन इमेज. It can be a fully fledged isolated Linux environment as well. So it can have a virtual and environment variables, some sort of database, maybe a server, anything, any kind of application and executable can be there in your image. And then from that image you create a pod. Okay, so a pod is a logical unit. Pod वैसे कुछ exist नहीं करता. Pod बस एक नाम है. Let's जैसे like in classes you name something a class. You name a class something, right? Maybe car, bike, etc. So that in the same way, this is maybe a structure in terms of Kubernetes, which is called pod. Pod सिर्फ एक logical unit है ताकि एक separation मिल जाए और एक clarity मिले कि we are dealing with a pod. Okay. Now a pod is made up of these containers. Okay. So there can be 1, 2, 3, many containers inside a pod. But it is usually advised that you create only one container inside a pod. Now Kubernetes will assign an IP to this pod. So this pod you can also consider it as a virtual machine which has an IP address. So you can ping to this machine, like you can do maybe let's say there is one Nginx server or a Python server running. Then you can do this IP address colon the port number, whatever you do in Node or Python, and then /home. So you will get the home page. That request will be served by the application running inside this pod. Okay. So do you have any doubts until this point? Okay. So when you take multiple of these pods, then you can create a deployment. Okay, and a deployment can have number of replicas. Basically, this is, let's say this is the template. The pod is the template, and then you say I want 4 objects of this pod, like this template. So this, let's say this is the class and these are the objects. So you will say I want 4 objects. So Kubernetes deployment will go and create 4 pods for you and assign them a unique IP address. So now you have 4 application instances running. So this is like 4 virtual machines running. Okay, and inside of Kubernetes everything is very secure. So you cannot access these pods because they are they communicate over some other network which is managed by Kubernetes. So you cannot directly go to these networks. To go to these networks, you have to set up a service, which is this. So this is like a fence to your cluster. and you determine then, okay, I want to expose some service through the port number 80. Okay, so you will say that whenever a request comes, maybe it can be a TCP request or a HTTP request or maybe FTP, whatever. You will say that whenever a request comes to the port 80, redirect that request to port number maybe 8000 of this deployment. So setting up this network, like mapping the request from port 80, external port 80 to an internal port, is taken care by the Kubernetes itself. So these were the problems that earlier Google and other companies had to face. They have to do it manually. But now Kubernetes can do this on its own. Okay? And but how does this do it? So everything in Kubernetes is declarative. तुम सिर्फ Kubernetes को बताते हो कि ये करना है, कैसे करना है वो नहीं बताया जाता Kubernetes को. Okay, so everything is declarative. So to declare anything, जैसे अगर किसी ने कोई ऐसी प्रोग्रामिंग लैंग्वेज C++ में भी होता है, हेडर फाइल्स के अंदर सिर्फ डिक्लेरेशन रखते हैं. यू ओनली मेक द डिक्लेरेशन एंड द एक्चुअल इम्प्लीमेंटेशन इज इन द .cpp file. Okay, so in a similar way, this YAML file, it contains the declarations. Okay, and you give this declaration to the API server, and the API server knows how to deal with those declaration. It has the CPP code, okay, to perform whatever is needed. So let's say this is a master node. Okay, so for Kubernetes to run, you have to deploy Kubernetes on some actual machine, right? At the end of the day, everything runs on actual hardware. So on some hardware, there is a master Kubernetes node deployed, which has an API server, and API server usually helps you to communicate with these scheduler and controller manager. Okay, what are these? Don't bother about these right now. I'll explain them later. And then this is some sort of key value storage. So this is etcd, which is a distributed key value storage system, and it is very fast. So that's why Kubernetes is using this. But you can switch it as well. And then these are worker nodes. These can be other hardware machines. This can be your desktop. This can be your laptop, and this can be your watch, if it supports that. And then on that you run a kubelet process and a proxy. What are these? Let's not bother about these, but let's say this kubelet helps to communicate with the master API server. So these kubelets are always running and they communicate with your master. And then let's say I have one deployment. I say that deploy this application declaratively. I send it to the server. Server then will instruct any of these nodes. Okay, there is a new deployment request. Do this. Okay, so this master server will take care of that. This is a sample Docker file for Python project, the Gymkhana website that is built on top of Django. So you basically select that I want Python 3.6. Alpine stands for, like, this is a version which has minimum size, bare minimum dependencies. Okay, so take it as base, and some environment variables are being set up, and then on that base do some dependencies. So this is the build step. So whatever dependencies that you require for your application to run, you can install these here. So you do pip install pipenv, and then you finally install your dependencies system wide. And then in runtime container, you again extend from that base. If some runtime dependencies are there, you can include those. And then finally you just run your application through a command, whatever you will run in a terminal, maybe Python main.py, something like that. So you can define that command here. Here the command is unicorn -b. B stands for bind, and then colon, whatever is the port number and the actual file name. And this is a sample deployment. So YAML, in YAML, you can consider it as JSON, but it's just more readable. And so this is a key. The API version is a key, and this is the value. What are these things? Like, what is API version, what is kind, what is this? I will explain it in the next slide. So let's just quickly finish this one. So there is a spec, spec which has some replicas uh, and the actual image name. So we build this image and we then say that this image is tagged with Develop Labs Gymkhana version 1. Now I will push this to a registry, some sort of cloud storage where I can just save my images after building them. I will build this image, I will save it to the cloud and then name it something. Okay, and then in Kubernetes I will say that I have named it this develop/gymkhana. I want this version, this is my image. If it is not present on your node, you pull it and then run this command. Okay, so here I say that I want to run Unicorn, bind it to port number 8000 and run 3 workers and run this application. Okay, and then there is this port mapping. So whatever request comes on HTTP, basically port number 80, target that to port number 8000. So basically I'm saying कि बाहर से जो भी request port number 80 पे आए उसे 8000 पे भेज दो, and the port 8000 is running my application, the actual server. Okay, yeah, and this can be the bare minimum deployment. Like this much information you need to run your deployment. Okay, so yeah, and this is the Kubernetes dashboard that I worked on GSOC, but it is the project that can give you a graphical user interface of your cluster. So this is the actual CPU usage of your cluster, and this is the memory usage. This is whatever workloads are running. What are workloads? I'll tell you. Yeah. So this is it for the Kubernetes basics. So it is like automating everything, your deployment into basically taking away deployments from you. It gives you an abstraction. It just asks you to give me a definition, a deployment definition, and I will take care of the rest. Just tell me what is your application and how to run it. Okay, that is what Kubernetes asks, and how it does it. We can have a look at that in Kubernetes. So any questions till this point? Okay, so this is it for the basics. Now we'll move on to the in-depth part. Yeah, so agenda for this one will be the recap of previous slides quickly, and the architectural overview of Kubernetes, like whatever I talked about, the master node, the worker node, and how do they communicate. And then some concepts like I told you that there is a deployment, there is a pod, but what is a deployment? What is a pod? Okay, so I'll tell you those as well, and then how an actual deployment works. Okay, let's say this is an application which is called Phoebe. They have named it, and this is a PHP application. Okay, so it is on a hosting provider somewhere, and it is also surrounded by other applications, but it needs that and this application is scary, that who are all these applications. So for these Kubernetes says that you need an environment. Okay, your own environment. So this is the index.php file which runs in a web server, and that's how the environment works. Now Phoebe has its own environment, but ज़्यादा कुछ है नहीं करने के लिए. So then there comes this whale which is called Docker. Okay, so it says that okay, I can provide you a container, and then you can run inside that container. But there are problems with containers because the networking is hard, and then they should be scheduled, load balance, and all those things. These are very higher level terms. And then Docker goes away. Docker goes away with all these problems left to Phoebe. That I only had the task to give you a container or environment, and then now I'm going. Then comes Captain QB, which is Kubernetes. And then so Kubernetes is great for captain or pilot, and it tells Phoebe that I will give you a name, and it slaps a name tag on Phoebe with some labels and selectors, basically to identify Phoebe. And he tells Phoebe that jump onto my boat, which is Kubernetes, and I will take care of the rest. So now Captain QB knows that this is Phoebe through this name tag, okay? Whatever Captain QB has given to Phoebe. So Kubernetes uses name tags to identify things. It can query based on these labels. So you can have some label that app is equal to Gymkhana and environment is equal to production. So it will, when you do a query that Gymkhana in production, it will give you all the pods, all the deployments which are matching those labels. Okay, it's like a database query. And then Phoebe was happy to be on Kubernetes. And then Phoebe got a room. This room is the pod. Okay, so now with this pod, it can communicate basically. So it has an IP address, and so basically networking part is done. Phoebe is only concerned that I'm in a pod. I have an address. Okay. So now Phoebe asks, what if I want to clone myself? अब मुझे अपने आप को clone करना है. And what about this? So Captain says that I know about your DNA and I can clone you. So this is where replica sets comes in, and replica sets are controlled by replication controller. So let's say there is a pod which is Phoebe, and you want to clone it. You can create another pod which is just like Phoebe. Okay, and then there are multiple Phoebes. But now Phoebe feels lonely. She says, I want to play with other friends. So Captain QB opens this tunnel, which is a service for Phoebe to talk with other animals, basically other applications. So this is a KHS service. So this service is the tunnel which has some IP address 192.158.0.1 and the port is 80, and this service always stays here. The pods can come and go, they can be destroyed, they can be recreated, but this service will always be there. So if there is someone else who wants to talk to Phoebe, they can talk to this service, and this service will let them talk to the actual clones, the pods. And then some other application comes and gives Phoebe a present, but Phoebe says that I have no place to put it. So then Captain QB says that I will give you a volume for it to store. So this is volume. So when you create a replication controller, this replication controller can also have a volume, which is actual mapping to data. So basically on some physical hard drive, you have a path /mount/data, and this path can be attached to these pods, which will be attached by the replication controller. Okay, so now Phoebe is fine, but she says that okay, I am a little concerned about my privacy. So Captain QB says that okay, I will give you a namespace. So everything, these whole things can safely reside inside a namespace. Does it make sense? Yeah. So now we come to the architectural overview. So from this point onward, this is going to be heavily, a deep dive. So if you are getting bored, maybe you will enjoy this, or it will just go over your head. So yes, we talked about the Kubernetes master node and worker node. So master is the controller, wo mai baap hai sabka, and he controls all the worker nodes. There can be multiple masters as well. And now to talk to that master node, we need something called a client, which is in this case a command line utility called kubectl. Okay, there are other names as well. People call it kubectl and other things. And this is the control plane. In the control plane, there is the Kubernetes API server, the storage pair, the etcd, and the controller manager. So the replication controller is here, okay, and the scheduler. And what are these exactly? I'll tell you in the last part of the PPT. And this is worker node 1 and this is worker node 2. On worker node 1, there is a pod running here on the container runtime. It runs everything on Docker containers. And there are kubelets which talk to the Kube API server. And these are the system services running on some other hardware machines. So this blue line, this small blue line, these are actual different hardware machines. Okay. And one of them is running the master node and the two are worker nodes. Okay, and let's say these are your customers. So let's say I am running maybe Pokemon Go, and these are the users of the game. They come to some load balancer on my cloud provider. Let's say I am hosting everything on AWS. So they come to a load balancer which is managed by AWS, and this load balancer will route the request to one of the worker nodes. And because of that request, the host name, these worker nodes know that which pod should this request be given to. Okay. So that is how the flow works. And users come to the load balancer, then it goes to one of the worker nodes. And these nodes are running the application. Yeah. So if you go more into, yeah.
वो पीछे वाली स्लाइड पे जाना.
Okay.
ये वर्कर नोड्स आइडेंटिकल होते हैं क्या सारे के सारे? मतलब लोड बैलेंसर तो ये देखता है कौन से फ्री हैं और कुछ उसकी पॉलिसीज होती हैं, पर डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ वर्कर नोड्स भी हो सकते हैं क्या एक मास्टर नोड के?
एक मास्टर नोड के डिफरेंट टाइप्स. सी वर्कर नोड की ऐसी कोई वो नहीं है. मतलब ये वर्कर नोड ऐसा हो सकता है कि ये वाला हो सकता है लिनक्स पे चल रहा हो. ओके, ये वाला हो सकता है कि ये विंडोज पे चल रहा हो, बट दोनों के ऊपर एक कंटेनर रन टाइम चल रहा होगा. Basically, Docker, we can install Docker on Windows and Linux both. Okay, we can install Kubernetes on Docker on Linux and Windows as well. So हाँ, ये worker nodes अलग हो सकते हैं. ठीक है, in sense कि ये Linux 16 पे चल रहा है, ये Linux 18 पे चल रहा है, और maybe this is running on Linux 18 and this is running on Windows Server RT, ऐसे करके. So yeah, worker nodes अलग हो सकते हैं, but there is a certain level of abstraction जो सेम रहेगी.
ठीक
है,
ठीक.
Okay. Now, if we go more into these master nodes and worker nodes, so master node में kube control manager होता है, kube scheduler, kube proxy, some additional services, and kube cloud controller manager. So let's say मैं Kubernetes पे कोई सर्विस डिप्लॉय कर रहा हूँ, कोई एप्लीकेशन डिप्लॉय कर रहा हूँ, एंड आई वांट ए आईपी एड्रेस. और मैंने पहले बताया that not everyone can outside your Kubernetes cluster can reach your application. Okay, so how will this load balancer know that I have to route a particular request to a node, and then from that node to this pod to get inside to this pod? So this is implemented by cloud controller manager, which is maintained by this cloud provider. So basically ऐसा हो सकता है कि AWS might have some different standards and they have some different infrastructure, and Google Cloud Platform might have some different infrastructure because maybe their networking can be different. One uses the 10.xxx CIDRs, one uses 172. something CIDR. So they are different. Okay. Now they can write their own cloud controller manager. Okay, which will tell Kubernetes that okay, if you will give me some declaration, some YAML, I will go this cloud provider will say I will go and set up a load balancer. Okay, so this part is left to the cloud providers. You can implement it in your own way, whatever you feel like. This kube controller manager, this is homogeneous in every cloud manager. So ऐसा होगा कि this is open source basically. ये open source version है. You can go and see the code of these controllers. So every declaration basically has a controller to control it. When you use this terminal command line utility and you give instruction to this Kube API server that I want to do this. and here is the declaration. But what is the declaration? The declaration is just a string, okay, a YAML file. Now, how to process that YAML file, and once that is processed, how to do certain things, basically logical things, right? So these logical things are done by this kube control manager. It converts the string into some logical units, and then it can apply all the language specific things like if, else, for loop, switch cases, anything. The controller can do it. Okay, and the actual declarations which come through the command line are stored in this etcd. Okay, so when I send some YAML file, it is stored in this etcd. So this is the overall work of master. It's very broad, but you don't need to go deep, that deep. Okay, so this is the kube proxy. Okay, so when this load balancer routes the request to one of the pods, okay, there is a kube proxy running here, and that kube proxy is configured by the kube master, and it has all the IP tables and other things to route the actual request. So let's say some request comes in for www.abc.com. Now this kube proxy knows that whenever this domain comes in, this host comes in, I have to route that request to this pod. Let's say this is pod A, this is pod B. Pod A is for abc.com, pod B is for xyz.com. So when xyz.com comes in, kube proxy will route it to this pod, and when abc.com comes in, kube proxy will route it to this pod. Okay. So this is broadly just the worker nodes. Worker has not many components apart from this kubelet process. So this kubelet process is also controlled by the master node. Now these are the labels. जैसे मैंने बताया, like कैप्टन क्यूबी ने नेम टैग लगा दिया एप्लीकेशन को, some labels and some values. So let's say these are the labels, and app is equal to nginx, environment is production. There is another pod which has the label app is equal to MySQL, environment is equal to development, and there is another host which is also running 3 pods. One of them has label as same as these two, and this MySQL is production version. Okay, so now there is a service which says I am the service for these labels. I am the service for app is equal to nginx and environment is equal to pod. So whenever a request comes to this service, the kube proxy knows that the requests for this service have to be diverted to the pods which match these labels. So basically this pod, and this pod. This service will route the traffic to these pods in whatever scheduling logic you have programmed it to. It can be round robin or maybe weighted or something else. In a similar way, you can also create services for these pods as well. And this is more in depth of how the actual networking works inside of Kubernetes. I'm not thinking to go inside it, but if you are not bored and you want to know how this works, I can go. So let me know. I'm thinking to skip it.
चित एक बार क्यूबलेट वाली स्लाइड पे जाइए, 2 स्लाइड पीछे. एक बार क्यूबलेट का यार एक बार बताना फिर से फंक्शन क्या था.
क्यूबलेट का फंक्शन ज्यादा अच्छे से मैं तब बता पाऊंगा जब मैं तुम्हें वर्कलोड्स के बारे में बता दूंगा. But if you want to know, kubelet is a continuous process running which takes in inputs from the master from this kube API server. It takes inputs from that kube API server, and based on that request, it is also logical, so it can do all the if-else statements and whatever, and then it will instruct the container runtime to run these pods. Okay. So basically this kubelet has the job to make sure that, okay, if the kube API server is asking me to have 3 pods of nginx running, then this kubelet will make sure that this node has 3 pods of nginx running. And if one of them fails, like it is destroyed, so this kubelet will let the Kube API server know that one pod has failed. This is the reason. Now you can do whatever you want. Okay.
ठीक
So the
ठीक
Kube server can say that okay, restart that pod, or maybe just delete that pod. I will make sure कि वो किसी और node पे, किसी और worker node पे मैं schedule कर दूंगा उसको. Okay.
Okay,
इस तरीके से.
thanks.
Yeah, about this network part. Does anyone want me to go inside this?
एक बार आईपीज वाला फ्लो बता दो, आई गेस तो सफिशिएंट होगा कि बाहर कौन सा आईपी हुआ, अंदर कौन सा आईपी हुआ, लिटरेचर रहने दो.
Okay. So देखो Kubernetes networking की एक requirement है, and the requirement is that every pod should be able to reach another pod without a NAT. NAT is network address translation. So if I want to communicate with another pod and that pod has some IP, okay, some IP address, then I should be able to ping that pod directly without any network translation. Okay. Now this is not possible in actual real world examples, because as I said, AWS might have some other networking, GCP might have some other networking. Okay, so that is not possible. But we can fool Kubernetes to believe that there is no network address translation. To do that, we have CNI, Container Network Interfaces, and you can implement your own CNIs, or you can use these open source ones. There is a Flannel network and a Calico network. Most popular one is Calico, and there are some others proprietary as well, made by AWS, made by GCP and DigitalOcean, because their networking may be different. So these are like plugins which you just install in Kubernetes, and then those CNI will manage the actual translation. And in some hypothetical scenario, it may look like this. So let's say you access some IP. Okay, I have a domain name called example.com, which the DNS resolves to this IP. Okay, so this IP, and this IP then translates the request to a load balancer, maybe Elastic Load Balancer from AWS. Okay, and then this load balancer will talk to the kube proxy or the worker nodes. Basically, it will route these requests to a worker node, which is this 10.100.0.3 inside of AWS infrastructure at this port. And then there is this is done on based on a IP table, router IP table, and then you actually route the request to some Ethernet network interface card which has a IP. This is maintained by, let's say, AWS, these two. And then when the request comes here, this will talk to the kube proxy, and then it will hand over the request to a container bridge, which will then route this request to this virtual Ethernet. So this does not actually exist. This is virtual, and this is actually the pod IP address to server pod 1. So this has this IP address of 10.0.1.2. So let's say this pod wants to talk to server pod on this, and this is on node 2. So this pod is not concerned with the address translation. इसको सिर्फ इतना पता है कि मेरे को दूसरे pod का IP address पता है. Okay, the first requirement of Kubernetes. Every pod should be able to communicate to another pod without the need of NAT. So this has the IP address of this pod, which is 10.0.2.2. This will say, I want to talk to this pod. Then this request will again go to this kube proxy again in some way. So basically to the container bridge, and then this Ethernet, and then this kube proxy will say, okay, I know how to route your request. This will go back to this gateway, and then to this Ethernet 0, and then to this. So there is actually happening some request transformation, the route transformation, but these pods don't know about it. And this routing is handled by the container network interface. Okay. So that is how the networking works. Was it clear? we'll also study about these resource and kinds. We use these a lot in Kubernetes. Okay, so a resource is a RESTful object. Okay, and the resource you can perform CRUD operations on that RESTful object, and that is why the Kubernetes API server is also, it's a RESTful server, and we call it a API server because it provides you an API. So every kind is a resource. Okay, so now every kind is a resource. Every resource is not a kind. Okay, uh, and then they are defined under a group, and they can have a version. Okay, so just let's say I have a version 1 of some kind, but in version 2 some breaking changes may happen, so I need to be able to version those, and all those can come under a group. Okay, so let's say I work for Microsoft or Google, and my group is Microsoft or Google. Okay, let's say google.io slash some version 1, and then the actual kind, and the kind is pod. So this is basically you are able to identify a certain entity in a API server. So you will just first give the group, then the version, and then the kind. This combined as a whole is called group version kind, which is actually used inside the actual code of Kubernetes a lot. So this YAML has an API version of V1 version 1. The kind is pod. Okay, the group is not defined here because here the group is default group. Okay, when you don't provide any slash or something like that, that is considered to be under the default group, which is provided by Kubernetes itself. I'll show you some other examples which have group and kind both. Okay, so there is a API version, a kind, and a metadata. Metadata has some values like what is the name of this pod, or more specifically this kind. What is the name of this kind, and what are the labels of this kind. Okay, the rest of the things vary from kind to kind. So a pod will have some specification, and in this specification we will have a container name, the image name. Okay, so this is one object inside of Kubernetes, which is a kind pod, and it is a resource in Kubernetes. So does this all make sense? Do you have any questions? Because this is sometimes very confusing for many people. Yes, CNI handles pod to pod communication basically, and it can be multiple nodes or on the same node as well. So it is up to the CNI. The pods are not concerned. So yeah, so this resource version kind thing, is this clear? Others, can I see a few more yes no's? Okay. Okay. So yes, and this is an actual request to the Kubernetes master node API server. So as you can see, the actual hardware address of that master node was this. The API server was running on this port 6443, and then this is the API and version of this, and then there is a namespace, and then the kind, and then the actual name of the pod. Okay, so if you hit this URL, a similar URL, you will get this sort of result, which is an actual API result, if you can think of it as. So it has a kind, API version, a metadata which has name, namespace. So some of this metadata is provided by us, and the rest is generated by Kubernetes. Okay, and then this is the specification, like what is the disk capacity that you need, and some initializing container. Do you need some pre-processing, and what is your actual container? These sort of things. So there are multiple kinds in Kubernetes which we call workloads. Workloads are the primitives. Okay, so a pod you know about it. So the smallest logical unit of workload is pod. Now when you want to create multiple pods, you create them with the help of replica set. Okay, so replica set is also a resource in Kubernetes. It manages the pod replication and their life cycle. Then there is a deployment. Okay, and deployment is superset of replica set. Then so a deployment can manage 3-4 replica sets. Basically, let's say you want to update your application from version 1 to version 2, and you want to do it in a rolling fashion. Okay, so you do not want that 100% of my application are upgrading at the same time. That will affect your downtime, right? So you will say that okay, only update one pod at a time, which is maybe 10% of the capacity if you have 10 pods running. So this deployment will create another replica set, and this replica set has a key called replication. So that new replica set will have a replication of 1. Okay, so when it has a replication of 1, it will create one more pod, and the deployment will reduce the number from the old replica set, which was for older version. Okay, so this is how these three work hand in hand. Now there are some special types of pod which must maintain state. For example, database. A database needs to maintain a state. Okay, so we call them stateful set. So a stateful set is like a replica set, but a stateful set maintains a state. Okay, so whenever you ask for maybe a hard disk space or maybe a service name, this stateful set will make sure that you always get the same things, because let's say there is one pod running inside a stateful set, which is your database, and when it goes down, it crashes and then comes back up, all your data is lost. Okay, that is not good. So that's why stateful sets maintain some states and make sure that the data is consistent. A daemon set is also a controller which makes sure that one pod or whatever number of pods you specified are running on every node, on every physical node. Okay, so you can maybe have some sort of data collector, some matrix collector. Let's say you want to collect that how many 200 requests are coming, how many 400 requests are coming, and how many requests are failing. All this matrix can be collected into some application which is running on every node. You know that every node is running an application which I can go and submit my data to. Okay, so daemon set makes sure of that. Then there is job. Job is also a pod, but it just runs once until it is successful. Okay, so it runs if it succeeded, then okay. If it failed, then it will try to repeat the job. Okay, cron jobs are just like Linux cron jobs. They are executed on a schedule. You can specify the schedule. So now this is another resource kind which is called cron job, and the group is batch. Okay, this is also not a complete group, fully qualified group. This is not a fully qualified group, and then the version is this. So the group is batch, and the version is v1 beta 1, and the kind is cron job. The metadata is that this cron job has a name of hello. The specification is that run this every 10 minutes. You have to run this cron job every 10 minutes, and the job that you have to run, the specification of that job is run a container and just echo hello there. So this cron job will make sure that there is some command running in your Kubernetes cluster every 10 minutes which prints hello there. Okay, so that is how you can define a cron job. Now then there is these ingress surveys. So basically I told you that through services are always there. Pods can come and go. They can be created. They can be destroyed, maybe on demand or maybe by fault. So these service will always be there. So let's say this green service is my application, and this blue service is my database. My the pods here. Let's assume there are green pods here. Okay, and these green pods, which is the application, wants to talk to the database. Okay, and they will say that okay, connect me to Postgres. Postgres is the service address, and then this service will route that TCP request to actual pod. Okay, so this is how the request will go, and for this service the incoming request is from outside. Okay, uh, I'll not go into ingress, but let's say that this is this is one load balancer. If you consider it a load balancer, this is a second level load balancer. Okay, so the request comes in. If it is for an application, it will redirect it to this service. If it is for a database, it will redirect it to this service if you have exposed it, this database. Otherwise, it will reject it. Okay, so that is how, yeah, this is a fully qualified group, networking.k8s.io. That is how you actually define a group, which is not a default Kubernetes groups. Okay, so you do the group slash your version and then your kind, some specification, where the rule is that whenever the host is example.com, just route that traffic to this service. The service name is nginx and the port is 80. So let's say example.com comes in to this ingress. The ingress has these rules, and based on these rules, it will say, okay, this is example.com, send it to service green, which is nginx on port 80. That is how it will route the traffic. Okay. Now the service can be of type cluster IP, node port, and load balancer. So cluster IP is only accessible within your cluster. A service of type cluster IP is only accessible in your cluster. So this will give you the IP of that pod. Basically, this service is IP. Okay, and which is accessible inside the cluster only. And then node port is a type of service which is accessible on the node. So let's say, and the node here is the worker node. So basically, if you can access the worker node and you expose a service of type node port, and you can access that worker node from somewhere, then you can go to that particular service easily. And then the third is the load balancer. So in load balancer, the service's IP address assigning is offloaded to the cloud provider. So when I say that I want a service of type load balancer, the cloud provider will give me an IP address. Okay, so AWS or Google Cloud Platform, they will give me an IP address. Okay, and which is the cloud layer that we talked about earlier. And then these are the storage classes for the volumes and all those things. So this is config maps. Config maps are nothing but just maps with keys and values. Okay, you can use these maps to maybe set environment variables. Okay, let's say you want to set an environment of username. Username is a key in your terminal. If you do $echo $username, you will get this value, which is coming from a secret. Okay, and secrets are nothing, they are config maps. Their behavior is very similar to config maps, but they are not exposed directly, they are encrypted. Okay, so this username is base 64 encoded, and this is also base 64 encoded. And when you say I want to access username, it will go to this secret file, my secret. Okay, and use this key username. So my secret dot username. Okay, so this will be assigned to this environment variable. That is how this environment is set up inside a pod. Okay, so as you are seeing that everything is declarative. We are just declaring that I want this. I'm not telling it to do how to do it. Like I will go and export username is equal to that value from their cat 8 and stuff like that. So I'm not telling it how to do it. I'm just telling it that do it. It's up to you how you do it. Okay. So that is taken care by Kubernetes. And then for storage, there are some abstractions: storage class, persistent volume claim. I will not go deep into these right now, but it's just, let's say one of my pod is saying, okay, मुझे space चाहिए. Okay, I'm claiming some storage. I want 10 gigabytes of space. So I will declare a persistent volume claim of 10 gigabytes. Okay, but now how Kubernetes knows that there is some 10 gigabyte space available. So I have a volume, actual volume, okay, actual volume binding on the physical hard drive. So this persistent volume claim will say to this persistent volume, let's say this persistent volume is of 100 gigabytes. This will say I want 10 gigabytes. So the controller for this volume will say, okay, I have 70 gigabytes available, take 10. Okay, and then this persistent volume may also it talks to this storage class. So the storage class can be anything. It can be a network file system or S3 bucket or Google Cloud bucket. Okay, so your storage for your application can reside anywhere. It can be on a network file system, on S3 or somewhere, but the actual pod won't know it because there is an abstraction. Okay, so if some of you might have used this DGX2 job template, this is I think I got it from Shresh, and so this is a job, and as I said, a job is a workload that runs only once until it is completed. Okay, so this is of kind job, and I am giving this job a name which is a TensorFlow job 1, something like that. And the specification for this job is that pull this image which is hosted on this registry NVCR, maybe NVIDIA Container Registry.io, and on the this is the group and this is the image name TensorFlow. I want this version like Python 3 version 3 or 19.1 TensorFlow maybe, and the command I want to execute is this command mpi exec, and the arguments that I want to pass to this command are these. Okay, so I want Python, and then this should be the file that you will run with this Python. Okay, and you are allowing any work in that in this container to be run as root. Okay, and these are the resources that you are allocating. Okay, so the limit that you are setting is that NVIDIA, the number of GPUs that are available to a pod created by this job is 2. Okay, you can only use 2 GPUs, and some volume mounts. They also create some volume mounts. So when you create a new flow for your tasks on DGX, it also creates 6 volumes. The exact definition of those 6 volumes, you can go and look at those definitions. So basically it will ask for 6 volumes and then mount those volumes. So these volume mounts are definitions which will map your internal path in your container to actual volumes. Okay, so this is how the DGX2 job will look like, and it runs on Kubernetes. Okay, do we have any doubts until this point? Where is a job executed exactly? What happens to the result of a job? Do we have to recall the result from master node? I'm not sure what result are you talking about from the master node, but a job will be executed on a job has a template, and that template is for a pod. So when you create a job, a new pod will come up, and that pod will be able to run some program inside of it because it is a container. And if you attach some sort of volumes and some secrets, then it can also save some data in those volumes. So basically, let's say there is a job which scrapes all the restaurants from Swiggy or Zomato, and you want that job to be run only once. Okay, so you write your code, your Python script or whatever, and you containerize that. You build it into a container, and then you specify in your job that this is my container and this is the volume that I am providing you. Okay, so when that script will run, that script will be fooled to think that you are writing data to this path, but actually because of Docker and containerization, that data will be written on maybe a network file system or maybe a S3 wherever you are providing that volume. Okay, so that is how the job will be executed. And then there is question, why is there a need to destroy and recreate pod? Can't we always keep them alive? Okay, so pods are actually long running processes. So pods are actually long running processes, and you know there can be multiple reasons why you want to destroy a pod or recreate a pod. So let's say you have an infrastructure, you are a cloud provider, maybe Google Cloud Engine, and you have 10 servers. Okay, so now on those 10 servers, there is five servers running for free stuff, and 5 are dedicated servers for some of your clients which pay you enough money. Okay, now when load for those 5 servers come in, those are paying you, they will crash, they will start to crash. Now he will say that I want to scale. Okay, so you will maybe just destroy the pods of your free customers. You will say that your application is lagging or something, and since you are not a paying customer, I will destroy your pods, your application, and you will allocate that hardware space, that compute power to your paying customer. Okay, so one reason may be that. Other is resource underutilization and overutilization as well, because let's say you are a food company. Okay, and you know that orders come in for breakfast, lunch, and dinner only. Okay, that is the time when you see a surge. In those times, you want your number of pods to be high, because you want to serve more traffic. You are scaling vertically, and sorry, horizontally. You are scaling horizontally, and the other off times, basically when no one is ordering food, you want to conserve your resources, because maybe you are paying for them. So that auto scaling thing is for better resource utilization. Okay, so I think that answers your question. Okay, this is I will just go through this very quickly, because these are just diagrams. So what happens is, when you create a new deployment, it goes to the kubectl and it validates it. If it is valid, it will check the authorization. If that is valid as well, it will check the second level authorization or something else like the actual resource ownership. So yes, for example, if anything fails, the request will fail. Okay, and if everything is okay, then your new YAML file, that is only just a string, will be admitted to this key value store. Okay, and then some initializers will run. Okay, maybe you need to set some resource version, whatever the extra things that Kubernetes was doing, right? Uh, these things. So these generated name and the self link, this UID, this resource version, these are some of the initialized values that Kubernetes provides to the objects so that they can be identified. Okay, so then this object is published. This is actually converted into a language, basically the Golang. Kubernetes is built on top of Golang, and then the object is published. And once it is published, the deployment controller will know that okay, a new deployment is published, and it will go to the deployment controller. Controllers are infinitely running loops which take an object from a queue, processes it, and return and moves on to the next object in the queue. So it just takes objects from a queue and keeps processing those objects. So this is the API server request loop, the thing that I'm talking about, the picking up of the object and processing it. It happens in a loop. And if that is a valid deployment, it will create a replica set and also store it in the key value database. An initializer will run and the object will be published. But this time it will go to the replica set publish event and will be taken up by the replication set controller. The same thing will happen again it will take it from the queue and process it, and then pods will be published. Okay, so in this these slides, this is the same thing that I have just said. And now this comes the scheduling stage. So the earlier we were looking at the deployment state, like the initialization phase. Now this is the scheduling stage. So once a pod is published, so it will apply some filtering and see what rules are there, and then it will create bindings. And once those bindings are created, so basically one pod is published and it is binded to, let's say, worker node 1 or worker node 2, and then this happens again inside a loop, and then it will update the pod name, perform some synchronization, prepare an environment, and this environment is taken from configuration maps, and then a new container will be created, but this container will be in a paused state. Okay, and once we provide a virtual Ethernet pair to this container, and an IP is issued, and then we pull the container image from a registry, and then finally we execute the initialization containers. Okay, and then finally the container is created. Okay, and then this container is actual running thing. This is the actual thing that this whole thing, the whole Kubernetes thing is built just to run this single container in this way. Okay, and then you can just check that if this container is live, is this ready, and then this API server will be informed about this, and then the state will be changed to pod status is ready, like the pod is ready now. Okay, so this is everything, and now we move on to the demo. The demo will be short, and this is just mostly the end of the presentation. Currently I am running the Minikube based Kubernetes cluster, and I have the Minikube version 1.9.2 and the Kubernetes version as 1.18, but to show you that, I will have to start the cluster. So I will do this Minikube start VM driver KVM2. Okay. So since I already did this command, it is actually just restarting the virtual machine of that Kubernetes cluster. I'm not hosting the cluster on some actual machine. I'm running a KVM based virtual machine, which is actually you can compare it to a hardware version, and yeah, so it has restarted, and it is preparing the Kubernetes version 1.18 on Docker 19.19.03. Okay, hopefully it will run soon. Do we have any questions? So Kubernetes is now done. If I do kubectl get pods, and then I will get this result. No resources found because there are no pods. But if I say get nodes, so there is one node Minikube which has a status ready. It is the master node, and the age is 7 hours 8 minutes. Okay. And if I want to see more info, I can do kubectl get nodes output wide, and then I will get this output, which is the name, the status. It is a master node, and internal IP is this IP address, and OS image is this. Kernel version for the virtual machine is this. So as Nikhil was asking, if the node is different, these kernel versions may not be there because maybe they are not published, or the platform is different, or maybe it can also be an ARM architecture or AMD architecture. Based on those things, these values will change. Okay. So from this point onwards, I will just use K for kubectl. Okay. So this is K get all. I want everything. When I do this, then so yes, the currently I only have one resource, which is a service called Kubernetes, which has this cluster IP and the port and all those things. So I can do Kubernetes kubectl describe service. SVC is short for service, and then I will provide the name. So I want to describe this service, the Kubernetes service, which is the only object that is currently present in our cluster. So if I do this, then it is showing me that this is name Kubernetes, the namespace is default, this is label, component is API server, provider is Kubernetes. So this is just a key and a value. You can have it as you like it. And then the type of this service is cluster IP. If you ping to this address 10.9.96.0.1, then you will be able to talk to the Kubernetes API server basically. And this is the endpoint. Okay. This is the endpoint. So if I go and hit it in the browser, HTTPS, then this will show that status is failure, forbidden, user anonymous, cannot get the path, forbidden. So basically, since I did not provide the username, password or a token, this API just rejected my request saying that it is forbidden. Okay. Now we will quickly go ahead and deploy a service, a deployment. kubectl run. So this is a command which is deprecated right now, but we can use this. So what it will do is, let me open another terminal, and here I will just show you my current cluster. Okay, so this is the cluster Minikube, and I will switch to deployments. Okay, so currently there is no deployment. As you can see, this is the default namespace, and the number of deployments is 0. Okay, but as soon as I run this kubectl run nginx, image is nginx, and by image nginx I mean that pull the latest version of nginx. As soon as I run this will give me some warning, but as you can see, there is this nginx deployment, and if you go inside this, there is a pod. This is a pod creating, which has the name, and the status is container is right now creating. And if you describe it, then you will see that there is this specification which has image is equal to nginx and host port, some other information, and some events. So the first event is successfully assigned default / nginx to Minikube. Minikube is the master node. Okay, so these events are coming from the default scheduler, which I said that I will tell you about the scheduler later. So the purpose of scheduler is whenever something comes in, it is up to the scheduler on which node it has to actually create a pod. Okay, so the default scheduler assigned this this pod to Minikube, and then the kubelet. Now the kubelet comes in, and the kubelet is actually pulling the image on this node, on the node Minikube. Okay, so it is running that command docker pull nginx version is equal to this, something like that. Okay, once it is done, it will start running, and the internet is slow, so this will take some time. But I think the actual image size, so yeah, this is running now. And if you again do event, so you will see that earlier the state was pulling, the image reason was pulling, and it was pulling the nginx image. Then it successfully pulled the image, nginx image 9 seconds ago. Then it created a container. So the container was created very fast, like in 3 seconds, and even less than a second it was started. Okay, so as you can see, the creation and starting of the container took only 3 seconds, but if it was a virtual machine, it would have taken the amount of time which was taken for that Minikube start VM driver is equal to kpm2 command. So now if you go inside this pod, you will see that there is a container running. So this is a container, Nginx container. The image is this. It is ready. State is running. There were no initialization, and yeah, it's just this information. This information is currently not coming because it also needs a daemon set. As I said that to run something on a node, you need a daemon set. So the matrix collector is right now not running. That's why the CPU and memory percentages are not coming up. But if it was deployed, they would have come up. Okay. And if I press one more enter, it will just tell me the logs. Now, if I now do k get all, okay. So now it will see that now I have one pod. So what happened? What exactly happened? Let's say. So I created a deployment Nginx, and then this deployment's controller created a replica set. Okay. And then this replica set said that I want only one replica, and the current replica is one, and it is ready, so I don't need to do anything. But let's see that what happens if I create more replicas of this. So this is a pod, one pod running. I will say k Kubernetes kubectl scale deployment Nginx and replica. Let's say I will scale it to 10 replicas. Now understand that the image is already there. Okay, the first pod took time to be created, but now let's see if I create 10 replicas, how fast can it do it. These are all pending. It refreshes every 2 seconds. Container is creating, and probably soon enough all of them will be ready. One is running. So the first container took around 100 seconds to 118 seconds to complete, and these are all now running. And since this is running on a virtual machine, that is why also it is a little bit slow. But if it was an actual hardware machine with a good processor, it would have been even faster. Yes. So let's say just scale it to 3 replicas only now. When I scale it to 3 replicas, only 3 will be running and the rest of them will be terminated. So now this scaling was manual. Okay, I scaled it manually. I told it that replicate it to 10 pods or 3 pods or 1 pod. But this can be also auto scaled. So if I do kubectl and auto scale, so I can do that. I want to auto scale this deployment Nginx when the CPU percentage is more than 50%. The CPU utilization is more than 50%. So I want that you can auto scale this application, but the upper limit for the scale is just 3. So you cannot create more than 3 pods. I must have some upper limit, otherwise it might just create pods infinitely. Okay. And the minimum limit is 1. When everything is fine, you can maintain 1 pod, and when things spike up, you can go up to 3 pods. So we can also auto scale this thing. Now, and the last part is how do I access this? This is all okay that I can replicate these things, and in the real world we want to use this. So I will do this. So now let's see service as well. So currently there is only one service, Kubernetes service, which has a cluster IP, no external IP, and it is forwarding the ports only HTTPS ports. Okay. Now I will expose the Nginx deployment on port 80. As soon as I expose this, there will be a new service called Nginx, and if I describe this, so the label is this, that run should match Nginx, and then the port is that you take the port 80 and map it to 80. So inside that Nginx container also it's running on port 80. I can show you that. So yeah, currently there is no port, but the default port for Nginx is 80 and 443. Respectively for HTTP and HTTPS. So now if I try to access this Nginx, I won't be able to, because I have not yet port forwarded things, so I will now do kubectl port forward. Okay, and what this pod's name is this. I will port forward it to this pod. I mean, I can directly port forward it to this. So right now it is port forwarding from my local host 5000 to port number 80 inside that container. So if I hit to 5000 now, I should be able to see welcome to Nginx. Okay. So this is the actual response from inside that container coming out to the external world. Okay. I can also probably, yeah. So any doubts until this point? In case of a real, real application, I would just go to this. Let me show you. So I will go to the definition of this service, edit service, Nginx. I will do this, and here, this is the type. So I will edit the type from cluster IP to load balancer. Okay, load balancer, and I will delete the cluster IP and save this. Okay. Right. So currently the type of this service is changed to load balancer, and the internal IP is this. Okay, but the external IP is now showing pending. Now the reason for this is that currently I am not a hosting provider. Okay, this is a bare metal setup, and I do not have some sort of cloud controller running, which will take this event and say, okay, there is some service which is asking for an IP. Now, since no such entity is there, this will be in pending state forever for now. But if you would have done this on maybe AWS or Google Cloud Platform, their Kubernetes engine, within maybe some seconds, you will get an external IP here. Okay, and when you get that external IP, you can hit that external IP from anywhere in the world, and you can maybe also assign a domain name to it, and that is how you will expose your service. Now all of this is abstracted in Kubernetes, and you can scale your application in production when you are in production to any number, and this will be an infrastructure which is highly scalable, highly fault tolerant, because when a pod fails in Kubernetes controller will automatically create another pod for you. Maybe it was just some memory leaks, or maybe heap got too big, so the app became unresponsive, and there was probes that came into picture, and they killed your pod and created another pod. Okay, so the applications in Kubernetes are self-healing. Okay, so yeah, and one example for this is Pokemon Go itself again, because they were one of the game publishers that went viral way too quickly, and they also published a report, I think, in which they said that their infrastructure was built on top of Kubernetes, and that's why they were able to scale up so rapidly, so quickly, because everything was in place. And if you see Psych application, it keeps crashing all the time, because maybe they are not able to scale their infrastructure rapidly because everything is set up manually. Any questions? Because I think that is the end. Yeah, these are some resources. So the best resource for Kubernetes is the official documentation. Then there is the Kubernetes GitHub repository. If you want to see anything that how something actually works, like I talked about controllers, right? So how does a controller actually works? So this is the controller package, and inside the controller package there is a deployment controller, and in the deployment controller, you can see that uh, let me show you the actual function. Yeah, so this is the run function. When you call a run function on a controller, it takes a stop channel. So channels are ways of passing messages into in a highly concurrent environment. So when a signal comes to this channel that stop the controller. So this stop channel is provided in these things, and then a new go routine is called. Okay, and this is called in a for loop. So basically, it will keep running and running and running until you call a signal on stop channel. Okay, so yeah, and then these are the methods that you add a deployment, you update a deployment. So this is the actual code that runs when you do something with kubectl. This is the code that runs on Kubernetes master node inside a for loop that keeps on running forever. And this makes sure that when there are events coming in, it does something. And then there is this link, Learn Kubernetes the Hard Way. This is a playlist on YouTube. You can search for it. These are some good videos which will actually show you how good things can be. Yeah. So if you can see here, this is actually real-time data coming from a service, and you can see that how many client requests are coming in, what is the success rate, and what is the server success rate, what is the response time, you know, separated by logarithmic and historical values. Everything can be seen from these. So that is the logging and metrics collection in Kubernetes is very good. And then this is Udemy playlist if you want to go through that part. So these are the video sources. This is the course resource if you want to use that. Yeah, finally, if you have any questions, please ask. That's all. I think we have some questions. Yes, okay. So edX course from Anshu. Keep a note of that too. What did you say about external IP about the load balancer you created in the end? Why won't it be assigned any address? Okay. So let me again go to that part. If you can, yeah. So as I said that this is the Kube API server. Okay, I ran a command kubectl edit service and change the type to load balancer. The request will go to Kube API server. Okay, Kube controller will go and take that new edit request and make the changes and again store it into etcd. Okay, once it is stored, it is there. It is published. Kubernetes API server has published it. But the problem with my setup is that I don't have these cloud controller managers. Okay. So these cloud controller managers are not present on my machine because I am not a cloud provider. So basically this cloud provider API or the controllers written by the cloud are not here. Okay. Since this cloud controllers and cloud provider API is not here, this cloud provider network edge, it won't know that I have to create a new IP address and assign an IP table value of that IP address to some of the one of these worker nodes. Okay, so since that controller is not there, this layer will not be updated, and since this layer will not be updated, there won't be an external IP address given to me. Okay, so that is the problem. That is why I won't get an external IP because I don't have a controller that will take into account that new request that was published that okay, now the service is a load balancer. This is a published request, but there is no controller to act on that information. Is it clear or okay? And this is it from my side. If there are no more questions, we can end the webinar here, and I'll share the slide link as well. This is also recording, so I'll also share the recording. Thanks, Nikhil. Thank you. Okay. Bye bye then.